Before I worked for Alabama DOT, I worked for an engineering firm, Lane Bishop York Delahaye in Birmingham. I was a project engineer and sat in on a number of meetings where we worked for an architect, and then the architect was the person that worked for the client. And on very large projects, there might be intermediate meetings with both the architect and all of the sub-disciplines. And so the HVAC guys, the electrical, the structural, the civil, geotechs might be present. And in one such meeting, the design team met together ahead of time, and one key consultant was completely off schedule. And because of that, they were going to have to go into this meeting and tell the client we're not meeting this milestone that was a big time milestone. Every other sub-consultant and the prime did what they were doing. It was the particular sub-consultant who had not. And there was raised voices and fist pounding and how could you, and it was really a very open discussion of impacts and feelings. But when that meeting was over and the whole team went then and met with the client, the project manager for the architect, for the prime, the prime consultant, when they talked about schedule, he stood up and said, "We are not meeting this schedule." He represented it as a failure of the team, one of which he took ownership of as well. Factually, it was not his fault, but factually, it was also his responsibility. That was his team. Did not single out anything, and that was a very telling moment, that was a moment that made a big difference. I saw leadership in action at a time when it cost that firm dearly, at least in that particular project, in credibility and maybe even in fee, to scratch that. I saw leadership in action at a time when certainly, if nothing else, it cost that architectural firm credibility with their client. And they could have perhaps regained some of that by pointing out where the real problem lay. But it was a team, they were responsible, and they stood up for responsibility. After that meeting was over, I promise you, there were some really hard meetings between that architect and that sub-client. Again, scratch that. When that meeting was over, I promise you, there were some really hard discussions between the architect and his sub-consultant. Okay, but that was after. When the client was present, the leader acted as a leader in that circumstance.